we've had, look, 3 days of testimony, all behind closed doors, 3 unique perspectives that the American people didn't get to see in this partisan and unfair process that Speaker Pelosi and Adam Schiff are running. Again, all based on an anonymous whistleblower with no first-hand knowledge, who has a bias against the president. It's been reported worked with Vice President Biden. And the question I keep coming back to is, why don't we know who this individual is? I mean, they're basing an impeachment process, trying to remove the President of the United States based on some anonymous whistleblower, again, with no first-hand knowledge, who has a bias against the president. And the only people who know, Adam Schiff, his staff, and a handful of other people. So a handful of people in the country, out of 330 million people in this country, trying to remove the president that we elected, and only a handful of people know how this whole thing started. That seems to me to be a question that needs to be answered. I would hope that you all would be pushing for that. Why we don't know who this individual is and can determine the credibility that he or she may have, I think is a fundamental question.
So if you want to speak to John Bolton, do you think it's important for John before these committees?
Again, we're getting ready to go into we've had 30 hours of testimony. We're heading into our 4th interview. I assume this will be another 8 to 10 hour day. Each individual offers their own unique and distinct perspective. If Chairman Schiff, if Adam Schiff decides to bring Mr. Bolton in, we'll have questions for him.
You talked about the whistleblower, but at this point, it's far more than the whistleblower making these allegations. It's the president's former advisor.
You don't think the American people have a right to know the individual who started this process to try to remove the president of the United States 13 months before an election? You don't think the American people have a right to know that?
But don't you think that there's a much larger circle of people now who are all saying...
Don't you think we need to know how this all started? The individual who started it all got a readout from the call between President Trump and President Zelensky, writes a memo the next day, uses terms like scary, frightening, crazy, and then waits 18 days to file a complaint. And who's the first person he runs off and sees in that 18-day interim? Adam Schiff's staff. And you don't think the American people have a right to know who that individual is? Come on. I mean, we're talking 330-some million people in this country. We're talking about removing the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, based on that guy's memo, that guy's complaint, who the first people he talked to were Adam Schiff, who's running this closed-door session, this closed-door process. I think the American people like to know.
So you think he has no right to anonymity?
He has a right to protection. That's what the whistleblower statute says. It doesn't say anonymity. And I think when you're talking about the President of the United States, for goodness sake, the American people who we all represent, they have a right to know.
Do you understand, does he understand that George Kemp was subpoenaed to appear here today?
I think he got a subpoena this morning from Mr. Schiff. I believe he did this morning, just the same process they did yesterday with Dr. Hill.
Congressman, have you heard anything over these hours that concerns you about the behavior of the president?
We can't get into anything there, but what I can tell you is what we can talk about was what happened in Mr. Volker's testimony, which was done under the transcribed interview rules, which are different than the subpoena deposition rules, which have been in effect for the last 2 interviews and, as I just mentioned, are in effect for today's interview. Mr. Volker was clear. No quid pro quo. Mr. Volker confirmed exactly what President Trump and President Zelensky said on the call. No pressure, no pushing, no quid pro quo whatsoever. And Ambassador Volker confirmed that. But again, we can't talk about what took place in the other interviews, even though it seems like the Democrats want to talk about certain things, maybe.
Congressman, your colleague Jay Hicks said that what is being said, in substance, you would be happy, you should be lucky that it's not public. You disagree, you wish it were public.
So we've called for that. We've called for the release of the transcripts all along. We've called for doing this in the open so that the 300 and some million Americans can see what's going on. So we've called for that all along. We got to go. Thanks.